Hello, I want to welcome you to the lecture for week 5. It's called Legitimization and Reproduction. Once again, we ponder the purpose of education in a democratic society. Paulo Freire, who wrote The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, argued from a critical theorist point of view that the legitimization of the oppressed is the essential task of education. This, then, leads to the recreation of society and ultimately to the reproduction of the newly recreated society. How does a society recreate itself and begin the process of legitimization? Could it be simply stated that each new generation has to buy into the principles of the revolution, equality, freedom, and justice? How can each new generation buy into these principles if those who teach each new generation have never been taught these principles in any meaningful way? Freire argues, quote, human existence cannot be silent, nor can it be nourished by the false words, but only by true words, with which men and women transform the world. To exist humanly is to name the world, to change it. Once named, the world in turn reappears to the namers as a problem and requires of them a new naming. Human beings are not built in silence, but in word and work and action reflection. End quote. Freire continues to argue that those who have been denied their primordial right to speak their word must reclaim this right and prevent the continuation of the dehumanizing aggression. He then asserts that dialogue imposes itself as a way by which they achieve significance as human beings. The question then becomes one of defining dialogue. Freire was a student of Marx and thus a student of Hegel. Hegel, in his monumental book, The Phenomenology of Spirit, resurrected the principles of the Socratic dialogue. Socratic dialogue is a process of drawing out of students their thoughts concerning a posed question. The teacher poses a thesis and invites the student to counter with an antithesis. The teacher and student engage in a dialogue which leads to a synthesis or a greater understanding of the posed problem. Hegel employed the Socratic method to arrive at his concept of epistemology, the study of truth, where a partial truth, a thesis, is confronted by another partial truth, an antithesis, which eventually leads to a greater truth, a synthesis. For Hegel, the unfolding of spirit leads ultimately to the absolute truth, which is God. This process is known as a dialectic. Karl Marx employed the Hegelian concept of dialogue, the dialectic, to explain the development of capitalism and the alienation and eventual enslavement of the working class. The opening sentence of the Communist Manifesto states that all history hitherto is a history of class conflict. For Marx, the bourgeoisie, the thesis, was always in conflict with the proletariat, the antithesis, and led to the development of a new society and the capitalist system. The dialectic is a process, a means of understanding human interaction and the development of a class-based system. Freire employs Hegelian and Marxian concepts of the dialectic to process a dialectical process to address the problems of the oppressed and how best to engage in the process of legitimization and transformation of society. Freire asserts the important thing from the point of view of libertarian education is for the people to come to feel like masters of their thinking by discussing the thinking and view of the world explicitly and or implicitly manifest in their own suggestions and those of their comrades. Because this view of education starts with the conviction that it cannot present its own program, but must search for this program dialogically with the people it serves to introduce the pedagogy of the oppressed, in the elaboration of which the oppressed must participate. The educational problem in California and the United States is how to legitimize the multitude of cultures, their core values, and prevent the problems of oppression. The educational problem is magnified when educators are forced to deal with the very real and often oppressive class structure based not only on race, gender, and ethnicity, but socioeconomic status. Freire argues that the human spirit Freire argues that the human activity consists of action and reflection. It is praxis. It is a transformation of the world. In other words, human activity is based on theory, actively applied, reflected upon, and reapplied. The questions are then, 1, have you found your voice? 2, have your students found their voices, individually and collectively? Number 3, how did this occur? Think about it, will you? And let me know. Please post your results in your journal.